All right, we are back after some technical difficulty yesterday. I think Zoom got overloaded, and so we'll be rescheduling yesterday's interview. Today, we have another Senate candidate for the Senate on the Democratic side. Eddie, I don't like doing it introductions because you're here, you can talk yourself, and so just want to say welcome and introduce yourself.
Hey, JD, thanks for having me, first of all, and for the folks that are watching today. And we'll take a few minutes just to let people who haven't met me before, haven't gone to our website or know much about me, give you a quick little background. I always start by telling people that I was born and raised and lived my entire life in Iowa. One of 5 kids. In my early days and growing up, I spent an awful lot of time at my grandmother's house in Carroll, Iowa, at my aunt and uncle's farm nearby there. And learned an awful lot about Iowa values during the many days and nights in rural communities. I came from a very humble background. My mom, she cleaned houses for a living, and she cut hair. My dad, after he had left the Navy, became a lifelong teacher and coach, which is all I ever wanted to be. And he taught in rural communities like Thompson, Iowa, and Colfax, Iowa, and Sadell, Iowa, before landing back in Des Moines. And I became just like my dad. I became a teacher. My first teaching job in Seymour, Iowa, a town of about 800 people in rural southern Iowa. Did some work in Indianola and Boone, and continued to teach and coach for a number of years. In fact, I got a chance to coach baseball against a team that JD played. And we'll talk about that maybe later on. In the midst of that teaching, I got a chance to utilize the community service and activism I've been part of all my life. I come from a kind of a Catholic Jesuit background, where I've spent a life in service and justice, social, economic, environmental justice. Got involved with the homeless communities as a teenager, and as a teacher, got my kids to come out early in the morning. We would go out and serve the homeless, feed the hungry, fix up shelters. Working with students like that and coaching and winning championships was really an honor and a joy. Education and life for me was really good. And it got even better for me with the arrival of twins. My wife and I brought to the world Dominic and Mia Mauro. And I tell folks that I promised my 2 kids 2 things: that no matter what they wanted to do, my son and my daughter, the world would be there for them, and the sky is the limit. And I would do whatever I could for them now and into the future. And as I set out to do that, though something unusual happened, I learned that we were going to have a hard time making it work. My wife and I looked at our family budget like a lot of people are today in the world of COVID, and realized we couldn't get by. And so I left the classroom, went out and built a business that now touches all the communities in Iowa. And I'm out there doing a lot of work today, every day now in the world of COVID, working with small business owners across this state. But because of that success, I was able to get back to my community in new ways, ways I never imagined possible. Started assisting domestic violence survivors and human trafficking survivors. I started fighting for workers' rights and farmers' rights and immigrant rights and racial justice and women's rights and many others. Became a champion of mental health, pressed our governments to improve schools, infrastructure, and always continued to fight for those without a voice in our communities. Like Barack Obama, I became a community organizer. Founding member organization here in Central Iowa known as Amos. It's done some great work, and it stretches into several counties now. Been going on for almost 25 years. And as I did that kind of work, I learned really important skills about organizing, about gathering and focusing resources, about getting help from volunteers who didn't always have the courage to lend that help, to get cooperation from people who didn't always agree. And those are great skills we can use in the United States Senate today. As I did that kind of work, I saw I wanted to help even more, because I've seen in my lifetime now living and working and playing in rural and urban communities that Iowans are still struggling to get by. And despite their hard work and determination to play by the rules, they can't get ahead. And that drives me now to cross the road from being in the private sector to doing community service and fighting from the outside to wanting to having a seat at the table, to fight from the inside out, to fight with those other folks out there in our communities, especially the leaders in the 4th District and others, to really bring the impactful change that we really need in this moment in time. And that's why I'm here today. It's a little bit about my background, JD, and I'm happy to expand upon that as we answer questions here today.
That's fantastic. To folks who are watching on Facebook Live, you can comment or if you have a question, you can put them in the comments. My team will give them to me and we'll ask them. For folks who are on Zoom, you can do it in the chat. And again, same process. And so we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So much of what we're trying to do here is introduce in this campaigning in the time of COVID-19, we're trying to get as many 4th District people and the Senate candidates all together as much as possible. And with the limitations of traveling these days, we thought this would be the best for folks who are watching. And so with that, the 4th District, we feel kind of the backbone of the 4th District is agriculture, childcare, education, and healthcare. And so I'll be asking questions on those. I have a set of questions, but then if anybody else wants to open it up, we'll do so as much as possible. So Eddie, with that, I'll start our first question. And it's on agriculture, and we're in the district. We're the 2nd most agriculture producing district in America, and farmers have suffered from the effects of climate change, a half-decade of low commodity prices, corporate consolidation, tariffs, and change in the supply chain, and now COVID-19. So what are some of the things that you would do to help farmers and in our agricultural industry here in Iowa?
Yeah, it's a great opening question and subject for the 4th District. First, I got to tell you, JD, I applaud what you're doing in the 4th District, not only your race, but what you're trying to do for candidates and to bring people together. In order to win statewide, we need to do better in the 4th District. And we saw that in 2018 in the gubernatorial race. And your efforts are going to help us to make that happen, and having the right candidate in the primary that wins in June, that goes on to the general elections, also going to help make that happen for both you and myself as we win both these seats here in November. But your question and subject on the first one is spot on. The 4th District is very heavy rural. It's a very heavy agricultural. And first of all, I got to tell you, as a small business owner, as a teacher and a coach, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I spent a lot of time on ball fields in rural Iowa and gyms and stadiums. I think I'm prepared more than anybody to step in on day one and represent the interests of Iowa's agriculture sector. And because of the work I've done as a small business owner and touching all those communities as well, further magnifies my capabilities and skill set to reach out in a meaningful way. And we got to show up, and we got to do that repeatedly. Again, not sure that happened enough in 2018 and some of the other statewide races, and it showed in the numbers that were there. But most importantly, the families that work on the farm and the communities supported by those farms need to have somebody that's going to stand with them. And I got to be honest, I think we've been approaching, and you and I have talked about this, and we've had other conversations about a 21st century agricultural system. I think we've been approaching agriculture in the absolute wrong way. In 2018, farmers got less than 15 cents of every dollar that Americans spend on food. That's the lowest amount since the Department of Agriculture began tracking that figure back in the 1990s. But big agriculture is making out like bandits. So there's something wrong with the dynamic there. And you and I talked about this just recently with COVID, where meat producers are getting a fraction of what they should be getting, but corporations are doing very well. And I think we need a U.S. Senator that gets back to some of the core principles, and a U.S. Senate that gets back to some of the core principles in the Farm Bill, where we have a real rural economic development, that we're supporting smaller operations, that we're bringing young people back to rural Iowa, and real conservation compliance tied to farm title programs that bring real results in terms of healthier soil and cleaner water. And if we do all that, we can improve our climate and environment, at the same time create new sources of income. We also need real healthcare reform in rural communities. And that helps rural farmers, especially family farms that are struggling today. We need to provide universal coverage to every American. Like many small businesses, the burden of paying for health insurance is a huge barrier to starting a business, and complicates many aspects of running an operation, even a small farm. Incredibly hard to even contemplate getting into farming as a young person today, when confronted with both the capital challenges and healthcare. And lastly, JD, we need to recognize that climate change is both an existential threat to our agricultural economy, but a massive opportunity for positioning Iowa farmers as leaders in carbon sequestration, protecting sources of clean drinking water. And those farmers ought to get paid to make those investments. And overall, I stand with the Farmers Union, standing for a world where farm families and their communities are respected, valued, enjoy the economic prosperity and social justice they deserve. I mean, that's very, very important. And I know that you've been on the forefront of this as well. So it's a great subject. Appreciate
well, I love that you brought up paying our farmers for their environmental services, because I felt with this in the caucus, that was probably the biggest thing for me that wasn't talked about in recent years that got brought up. And I just think that narrative needs to get out there more, because it's the right thing. We can't expect people who haven't been able to make a dime for the last 6 years because of the low commodity prices to change when the money's not there. And so if we incentivize folks, we give them money to do so, it's going to benefit all of us. So I'm glad you brought that up. So moving on, next question. A recent study shows that 76% of children under the age of 6 in Iowa have all available parents working outside the home. How will you expand childcare?
And that's a very important question, because especially in rural communities in the 4th District, where childcare is both a supply and a cost issue, there just aren't enough certified childcare providers in Iowa communities. And before we came to this kind of world of virtual campaigning, we've been to 90 of the counties. Our goal was to get to all 99 twice in the cycle, and do something beyond what that other senator has done already. But both in rural Iowa and in our cities, there's a glaring problem, and we need to make sure that we're finding a way to make sure there's enough childcare to go along for our families. And for where there are providers, they're often too expensive. They're too hard to get into. They're often inconvenient. The quality of care in some communities is not up to par with where it needs to be to really help young people out in a meaningful way. So we need quality, affordable, accessible childcare so our workers can live and thrive, especially in rural communities. I was in Webster City some weeks back and talking to the small business community about that. Their biggest need is just that, JD. And they're struggling with that, and their workers. And with that, the first thing I think we need to talk about is addressing the question of paid family leave, though. And Joni Ernst twice, just in the most recent recovery bill for COVID, voted twice against paid family leave. It's just a head scratcher for me. It's when parents decide to start a family where the conversation about childcare really starts. And those first 12 weeks of a child's life, so important to them developmentally. We need paid family leave. It allows both mothers and fathers to stay home for up to 12 weeks. I've been doing that already as a small business owner for 20 years now. That needs to happen. And their jobs should be protected, and their income should be at least 68% of their typical wages. Meet the minimum threshold of income every worker should qualify. I got to tell you, secondly, I would support expanded grants at the federal level to help cover the cost of universal pre-K, which is underfunded. We had a lot of good presidential candidates as well talking about this, and we need to take that to another level. I hope you're going to do the same in U.S. House of Representatives. I want to partner with you to talk about that in the United States Senate. We need to significantly increase grants through Head Start programs to expand access to areas targeted as having limited access to child care services, allow states flexibility to use additional Head Start funds for training of new providers in their communities. And then lastly, I believe we need vocational training programs at the high school level to train young people for childcare and preschool learning environments. Much like we should expand investments in vocational training in the construction trades and other industries, and also in healthcare industries, we need to find more people that can do these jobs. And then we need to pay them and provide some subsidization. So when I talk to the small business owners in Webster City, and then in Mason City, and in Cherokee and other communities, there's a lot of folks that want to start a daycare, but they can't hire and pay employees enough. So employees are going to, and you know where they're going to the Dollar General store and working because they can make more money. So we got to provide some subsidization payroll to those small business owners that are trying to start daycare centers in all of our communities. And we better have a public and private initiative to make that happen. And you need you and I in Congress to make that go.
Absolutely. Um, Next question is in education, and it reverts back to when I was in high school. We were first in the nation in education, but when I was in high school, my sophomore year, 1996, my first start on varsity was against you guys, and I got a hit, and so uh, that's a memory I remember being on your field. I think you had a lefty who ended up pitching at Creighton.
Yeah.
And that's who I got my first high school hit off, or first varsity hit off. But anyhow,
Yeah, he came in the dugout and said, I never, he came in the dugout and said, I never saw somebody so tall at home plate.
so, so Iowa used to be first in the nation in education, and we're not anymore. So what are some of the things what's your thoughts on education as what we can do and on the federal level?
Well, the first thing, JD, we need to elect a teacher to the United States Senate that's prepared to talk about education on day one. You know, I talked about my background being so diverse, and there's nobody else running right now in this primary or in the general election coming up that has the depth and breadth of a background that I have. So the work I've done in education is very important. Secondly, we need to get Mr. Trump out of office because when we boot him out, then Betsy DeVos goes along with him, and we can probably elect somebody, and then you and I, or at least I can on the Senate side, we can make sure that we're going to appoint somebody and approve somebody that's really interested in education again. And that's very important for us. But for real, as a former teacher, this is personal for me. We need the United States Senate to start prioritizing public education. And as Joe Biden has said many times, don't tell me what you value. Show me what your budget is, and I'll tell you what your values are. And he's spot on. And we've done this, JD, at both the state and federal level now for a number of years. We've underfunded education at the state level and federal level, from public education, elementary, high school, and even colleges today. And now we're putting a boatload of burden on people that are trying to go to college. We've gotten rid of Pell Grants and all kinds of things to make it more difficult. So I would support education in the Senate is to improve in interest payments on college loans first and foremost. Especially in a time of COVID, we need to make sure we're suspending all payments and wiping out all interest, all fees, all the way back to the beginning of time, and helping young people service those debts. We got a broken system there. I'll expand programs like Pell Grants to ensure that the cost of a school is not a barrier to entry. I'm going to support reforming how education system is funded. It's out of date. JD, you probably see this firsthand in Sioux City and other communities. Where you live and your zip code dictates the type of education you have, the type of facilities you have, the types of tools and resources you have. That needs to change. What our public school teachers make right now is a criminal. So in this reform, I would be looking to make sure that we're figuring out a fair tax system with property taxes and a fair funding formula. Your zip code can no longer dictate the quality of education received. And that's something that harms rural communities in our minority sectors as well. I'd also like to see us do more funding for rural schools. The rural communities I spent time in and teaching and coaching, and even the places I now visit today as a small business owner, are lagging way behind. And rural schools have a lot of challenges already because of declining populations and fewer kids in school. So we got to think about how we make sure we're supplementing all of our rural schools, and it's not all just based on what they do in there. Because I got to tell you, there's a lot of superintendents in rural communities that are doing some creative math to try to make ends meet. We shouldn't make them do that. They shouldn't be put in that position. So those are all the kinds of things we need to be able to do. We got to go value education, JD. We got to value a lot of things, but education is at the top of the list.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks watching, if you have a comment, put them in the comment section, or if you have a question, put them in the comment section on Facebook. If you're watching via Zoom, you can put them in the chat and we'll get to them. We have a few questions lined up. I have one more and then we can start opening it up a little bit. And so I met a woman in Hubbard, 840 people in Hubbard, and she had an inhaler that cost her $247 a month, and she couldn't afford it anymore. So her doctor ended up giving her one that was $183 a month, but less puffs. ultimately, she again said, like, that's very tight on my budget. And the doctor told her, just go up to Canada. And that's where we're at with our healthcare plans. And so that's on prescription stuff. But what is your overall idea on what we need to do for healthcare?
Sinful what we've done to people, especially people that are struggling in all of our communities, rural communities and urban communities, relative to healthcare. And as we probably all know today, that Bernie Sanders suspended his campaign, but my hat's off to Bernie for what he brought to the table in talking about healthcare, because he's absolutely right. Healthcare is a human right, full stop. I personally believe that we get to universal coverage through a public option model. But I'll also vote for Medicare for all if it's proposed and comes to the Senate floor. I'm assuming you would do as well, JD. But we need to figure out if that's not viable, how we also get to the end game, that every American has health care because it is a human right. Just because you have coverage also doesn't mean you have access. And we're seeing that firsthand in rural communities, as you just mentioned, the woman in Hubbard that you talked about, that has coverage but has weak access, inadequate access, and we got to shore up all those. We need to make sure that everybody has access to quality doctors in the pharmacy. We need to make sure that that we're working on healthcare that brings facilities back to rural communities in particular. And again, if you talk about the 4th district and not just farming and main streets and town squares, but being able to go see a doctor is going to be more and more problematic. Being able to get a mental health professional, more and more problematic. We got a lot of work to do, making sure there's pharmacies close by so we don't have deserts of mental health professionals, healthcare professionals, and pharmaceutical professionals is a big challenge that we need to address. It's going to take some leaders to do that. So I believe we need a substantial investments in rural healthcare facilities. We need to introduce rural broadband to better connect people. I think you and I talked about this yesterday. I've had so many meetings going on, but we got to be able to expand telehealth care services as well. Create a minimum standard of distance for healthcare facilities to be available. Somebody shouldn't have to drive 30, 40 miles. Somebody shouldn't have to go to Canada, for crying out loud, to get their medication. And although some rural health facilities will require subsidies in order to remain in the black, I personally believe we can't continue putting profits in the healthcare industry over people. And we continue to do that, JD, and we got to change that right away.
Yeah. Yep. Amen. I'll say to that. First question is from Tom, and Tom, it's a good segue because he was asking about what would you, especially in rural areas, there's limitation on mental health services. What are things that we can be doing about this?
A handful of things, and a lot of what we're talking about is starts with investment. I mentioned the Joe Biden comment earlier. I mean, we look at our investment budget at the state and federal level when it comes to mental health. And it tells you we don't value that. We don't value folks that are struggling out in our communities. And especially today, let's take that back. Even before COVID, rural communities were struggling. 80% of our state lives paycheck to paycheck. And especially rural communities where we're seeing farmers struggling, as you mentioned, as we got started here, and you and I have talked about in the past. We're seeing small businesses really struggling in rural communities. Mental health is elevated quite a bit. And what have we done over the past several years? Closed facilities, reduced funding, made it tougher on social services, discouraged mental health professionals from wanting to go work in rural communities, because why would you? Medicaid, the privatization program has made it even worse too. So in every element of what we need to be doing for communities, we've done the opposite and harmed them. And that's why I'm out talking of what you're doing such a great job. We got to go in all these communities and have these conversations. We got to make rural Iowa in the 4th district Democrat again. We got to do a better job, those Democrats, letting them know that we dropped the ball, that we failed you because you left the party. And there's reasons why you left the party, but we want to come out and tell you that we want to have you back, and we deserve to have you back because we're going to go fight for you for these issues in a meaningful way. And it's so important that we do that. From a prescription standpoint, we also need to talk about, and this is one thing we can do with student loan debt, encourage folks that are getting involved in mental health services to go to rural communities, and we're going to do debt forgiveness for that kind of work. And then we need to go out and invest and add some subsidization if we need to for rural communities. And you and I talked about this yesterday. I loved coaching and teaching in Seymour, Iowa. nothing better than sitting on the front porch after a ball practice and just hearing peace and tranquility. And a lot of people want to go and enjoy that. And we need to make sure we're helping folks enjoy that, because if that's the kind of standard of living, the quality of life they want to have versus moving to a city. But we need to go out and make sure we fortify those rural communities. And our friends on the other side have not done that. They've actually been part of the destruction and devastation of rural Iowa. And part of that is mental health. So it's a great question. Thanks for asking. We got to go invest.
Yeah. I'm a music guy. And so I'm thinking of stuff when I'm done with, when we get to go outside and have events again. I think of what concert I want next. Is there a certain concert that you would go to, or if you're not a music guy, what are you eager to do once we're past this?
Well, I like to do a lot of things, but I'm a music person. I love to go to concerts, and I know that the guys are a little bit older, but I love to go see Paul McCartney.
Oh yeah.
And Elton and John together. And
Yeah.
they're both kind of winding down their careers, but to go out and see that kind of music and the soul that they bring would be outstanding for us to have.
Absolutely.
Yep. Looking forward to going to the baseball field and playing catch with somebody really soon.
Mike asked, Iowa's best bet to fight climate change is not just renewable energy, but also regenerative agriculture to draw down carbon. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, spot on, Mike. And we've been talking about this a lot. That I think the pathway forward for rural Iowa and our rural farmers is to work with them on the climate solutions, which is regenerative agriculture, cap and trade, carbon sequestration, creating biomanufacturing from new sources of products that are grown in our farms and using our farmland. And that does a multitude of things. Helps with the budgets that farmers have, so they can be profitable. They don't have to rely so much on subsidization because they're not making enough. But we're providing a little bit of subsidization for them to go out and build new revenue streams. And that's a whole different type of agricultural thinking that we need to move towards. But then that also regenerates our soil, which draws down emissions, requires less need, and helps us retain water. So that water is not running into our streams, and improves than our rivers and streams and our lakes, which is some of the worst waterways in the country today. And we're the leading polluter all the way down into the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. So there's so much winning we can do, but we're running against headwinds. Right? We're running against special interests and big industry that do not want to move in this direction. And I'm running for the United States Senate against Joni Ernst because she takes a lot of money and a lot of orders from Koch Industries and big money. And until we go out and demonstrate that rural Iowa wants to make these changes by voting for a Democrat, to kick special interest out of here so we can go help rural communities again be strong, then they're going to have the same thing happening. So let's make sure that we're speaking up and speaking out, ready to go vote for a Democrat in November.
Yeah. One of the stats I read today, 60% of all apple juice that we consume in America is made in China. Huh. And you think of, there's orchards around Jefferson, Iowa, and down in Harrison County. It makes no sense, and it's all driven by policy. And so these are some of the things that I'm hoping that one thing that comes out of this coronavirus experience is that we really put the emphasis that we need American farmers. A huge part of why we're a secure nation is because we're a food secure nation, and food sovereignty, I feel, is going to be a huge next step in a lot of this stuff. And it's supporting farmers, diversifying, and really adding value in different ways to what we have right now. And so, so that stat just blows my mind.
Oh, it's crazy. And you know what, JD, your point is, we tell a lot of people we support them. We tell farmers we support them, but look at the policy. We tell veterans we support them, right? Thank you for your service. But look at our policy to the veterans. We tell teachers we support them in law enforcement, and look what we're doing to try to reduce gun violence in our communities. I mean, on and on we can go about where we talk a good game, but our actions don't marry up to that. And we want to talk about helping Main Street and Town Square business, but then we neglect the infrastructure in rural communities and fighting for childcare in a meaningful way and all the things that we need to have in communities like that.
That's exactly right.
It's a head scratcher for us.
Right. Next question is from Lindsay. Can we please find a way to expand student trade school opportunities?
Absolutely. Did you say Lindsay?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely, Lindsay. And we've been talking to a lot of educators. And back when I went to high school and back when I was teaching, the trades were part of the shops were part of high schools. And because we've cut slashed budgets for the last couple of decades now almost, we've had to get rid of the trade classes that are going on at the high school level to help people who might not be college bound to start learning those skills that can go out and find meaningful trades, and join unions and create middle-class jobs. Absolutely right. And then we need to do that also with our community colleges. But you know what's been going on at the federal level? We've been reducing apprenticeship programs. We've been reducing the amounts of monies at the state and federal level to go to community college and to high schools, and they don't allow that to happen. I got a good supporter in Ottumwa who was a teacher of shop. I mean, did that for almost 3 decades. And he saw incrementally every 5 years how they would reduce and reduce and reduce. And pretty soon there was nothing left for him to teach. And we've done that to all of our communities. And that's why people are leaving rural Iowa, because we stopped teaching that. People had to go to cities and larger communities to learn those trades and then didn't come back. And if we want rural communities to be vibrant, we don't want people to leave necessarily. Let's try to educate, keep people there, give them a reason to come back. And it's about giving them good jobs and an economy, but it's also about the things we've already talked about. We need to make sure that the water is clean. People want to come and recreate in rural communities. We need to make sure that education is strong, that there's mental health and physical health and healthcare facilities. There's so much we need to be doing. So it's all intertwined. It's so complex. Again, we have the right leaders that have done this kind of work, that have worked on the intricacies of business in a meaningful way to go be the leader that you need to have right now in the United States Senate. And that's me.
Yeah.
Great question, Lindsay.
And it's one of those things where I think another thing that coming out of COVID-19 and what we're dealing with now is we're seeing so much more appreciation of restaurant workers and grocery store clerks and obviously the frontline healthcare workers. But I'm hoping we expand on that, because in the northern part of this district, I can't remember if it was Emmitsburg or Emmitsburg or where was it? Esserville. I was talking with folks up there not too long ago, and they were talking about how just to get a refrigerator repair, it's a month's waiting list because there's just not a lot of people up there doing that. And so valuing work and the dignity of work, I think, is something that I'm very hopeful for. And again, given more opportunities, there's so much. I look here in Sioux City, and when I decided to move back several years ago, the best job I could find was $15 an hour with no benefits. So many of the kids who do go off to college, they come back here and they realize their first job is working at a bank for $12 an hour, and with all that student loan, and that's not keeping kids here. But you see the students who leave high school and go into a union or an apprenticeship program or something like that, those are the ones who are making the $60, $70, and $80,000 jobs in the not too distant future. So I'm good question, Lindsay. Good answer, Eddie. Moving on to the next question from Gary. Can you talk about public service workers and pensions?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. They're under siege. And everybody that's in public service and our public service unions are very worried about that. Again, both at the state and federal level. And there's always undercurrents about getting rid of the pension systems for public service workers. Those that are working in our city halls or again, that might be in law enforcement or our postal services. I've talked to a lot of those union members that are very concerned about that. Folks that work in law enforcement in our county jails or our prisons. People that are government social workers are out doing good work in our communities. There's tens of thousands of public service workers that kind of live in fear about their future because they're not sure if that rug's going to get pulled out from underneath them. And then you hear Joni Ernst every once in a while make kind of comments towards that. And you hear that at the state level with some of our state legislators. And that's why it's even more important, JD, that you win and I win, but also that we make sure we turn our Iowa legislature, the House especially, into the blue column in 2020. It's going to be so critical that we make that happen. And helping Chris Hall and other folks in your communities up there in the 4th District and all the other Democrats in 4th District, we need to get a few more Democrats elected. So I'm concerned. And at the federal level, we're going to go out and defend it. We want to go out and defend pensions and retirement programs and healthcare programs for all of our public service workers. We need to make sure we're doing that. And we need to make sure that we're continue to support collective bargaining at all levels, and the right to bargain, the right to organize, the right to go out and fight for your wages and your benefits, the things that the state of Iowa took away from statewide public sector workers just a few years ago, something that Joni Ernst supported.
Right.
Yep. So got a lot of work to do there. Great question.
Just a few more questions, and then I'm respectful of your time here. You've been to 99 of the 90 counties. You're going to plan on going to all 99. Do you have a favorite Iowa moment from one of these?
Yeah, Jackson County is a little town in Jackson County. Let me first of all tell you this, and you've probably seen this too. When you're out traveling around just the 4th District and then traveling around the state, there are so many hidden gems that we forget about because we get stuck in our own neck of the woods. I'm encouraging everybody once the all clear is given to spend some time traveling around the state. There are so many beautiful areas around the state, and I see them up in Northwest Iowa in areas like Okoboji, beautiful areas. My mom's hometown, Carroll, Iowa, is a great lake just south of there. That's really cool, really tranquil. Something that you would also find someplace like Colorado. I love going to Northeast Iowa, up in Decorah, and then over to the Mississippi River. It's where we stopped. Our last tour was going down the Mississippi River and through those river towns of Marquette and McGregor. And we forget about it. We hardly even know about those communities. A lot of us, if I'd ask you if you heard of those, a lot of people wouldn't know it. So many beautiful communities on that side. And then on the Mississippi River side, working down through Missouri Valley, down through Council Bluffs and all the way down to the bottom of our state. So many beautiful places. There isn't really one that jumps out at me. I'm just in awe of the beauty that this state has. And we need to have the right leaders, though, to make sure that we're going to invest and protect all of that beauty that we have, that soil, that air, that water out there, so that the next generations can also enjoy the state of Iowa and all of its beauty.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. Just two more questions here. Jim asks, how can you work with the other side when Republican senators are under the Trump spell?
That's a great question. And again, I think it's something that separates me from everybody else. Is somebody that's gone out and had to do work with folks on the opposite side of the aisle from you and get things done. And I've done that as an educator. I've done my advocacy work. I got a chance to work with the Farm Bureau a few years ago on a piece of mental health legislation that we helped push through that moved the ball forward a little bit. So I'm capable of going out and having those hard conversations and finding out where those hurdles are and sitting down with people to find out how do we overcome those hurdles. What is it that's keeping you moving forward? I want to have the day to go sit down with Mitch McConnell. Hopefully he's not the majority leader, but just let's assume for a minute he is, to say, hey, Mitch, how do we help make sure that every American has health care? Everybody in Kentucky needs to have health care. You do realize the addiction problem in your country, or in your state. You do realize the number of people without health care in your state. How do we become heroes together and make sure every American has health care? How do we do this, Mitch, to make sure your grandchildren are going to be able to have clean air and clean water, healthy soil? How are we going to get past those hurdles that are out there for you? How do we break them down? So we're going to start by having conversations. We want to try to work together first and foremost. And then we need to have leaders going to speak up and speak out every single day. It's one of the reasons I'm running, because Joni Ernst has failed to use the microphone that she's had over the last 5+ years now to speak up for Iowans and speak up on these very important issues for this country and this world. And we need to have a leader today, and somebody that's been a leader all along, fighting for our communities now to come out and fight again on the inside of the room as United States Senator and partner up with J.D. Scholten, right? So Eddie Mauro, J.D. Scholten, what a duo we'll be together, coach and pitcher, going out there and bringing the heat into to Congress in 2020.
Last question here from Christine, which is a good, I think the last one was a good lead in, is how would you handle the drug addiction, especially with the youth that end up in prison?
A great question, Christine. I got to tell you that I've been personally impacted as in family members and kids I've taught and coached. And unfortunately, maybe JD, you know, somebody that you might have played ball with or was a classmate of yours. I've hugged too many parents that lost a child, that lost that battle to addiction, and very, very troubling to see that happen, and to see and not to understand, and again, listen to the science, which is what happens again most of the part from the folks on the other side. They just think that somebody can wake up one day and said, nope, no longer going to use heroin or any other type of opioid product, or nope, all of a sudden just going to stop drinking, or nope, all of a sudden just be done with meth. You can just stand up and will yourself to do that. That there's a disease there, and the disease is just like having cancer or diabetes or depression, and we need to go treat the disease. And you don't treat it by putting people in prison. You don't treat it by having law enforcement be in the front lines now of helping deal with addiction issues, or the probation officer. And again, we need to make investments in all of our communities, and especially rural communities that are really struggling with this today. That we have healthcare professionals, that we have rehabilitation facilities in all of our communities that help navigate families, through this particular disease. And it's very traumatic. And I'll tell you firsthand, it's not only traumatic for the person that is addicted, but for everybody that's involved, the parents and grandparents, the siblings, and everybody else. And it's something, again, that we need to have the right kind of leaders that can be prepared, that'll come and talk the truth, and that'll show the compassion, empathy that is deserving to folks that are struggling with this disease. And it's very, very important that we do that. There's so many other instances where we drop the ball with people, and here's another one. And I got to end with this, JD, really quick. People ask me, what's the issue that's most important out there? And if you listen to this conversation tonight, there isn't one. There's hundreds. You talk to people, and everybody's got a different anxiety, something that weighs on them every day. Yep, we could say it's healthcare because that touches so many people. We say it's the climate environment because that does touch the whole world, and we got to address that, no doubt about it. There are folks out there struggling every single day in this state, in this country. And we need to have the right kind of leaders and to go out and fight for them in a meaningful way. And we're not doing that. You know why? Because you don't have any power. You can't pick up your phone right now and call up Senator McConnell or Senator Ernst or any other senator. They're not going to answer the phone for you. But someone with a lot of money, they're picking up the phone right away, right? They see that Mr. Koch's calling. They're answering the phone. How can I help you, sir? How can I help you? Oh, squash that next bill that's coming up about improving our climate? You bet. See that phone call from somebody in the healthcare industry? Oh, how can I help you? Oh, yeah, we're gonna make sure pharmaceuticals industry stays in power. And we got to overcome that. And I'm going to go out and continue, along with JD, walk along with him. We're going to both walk tall together about how we're going to go out and share this message in all of our communities. When I'm in the 4th District and those 39 counties, and then all the other counties in this state, that share that message with everybody. Democrats are on the right side of all these issues. This is the party of the people. And we want to make sure the people join us in 2020. It's so, so important. Thanks, JD, for having me.
Oh, thank you. Before we go, where can people find more information about you?
Thanks for asking. So eddieMauro.com. I think my name's at the bottom of the screen there. Check that out for the spelling. If you put eddieMauro.com/live, you'll see all of our live events. There's one from last night that had on the famous J.D. Scholten. We got a chance to talk more baseball last night, so go check that out. It was a lot of fun. We need to have more conversations that are lighthearted too, about baseball and apple pie and Chevrolets. But go to eddieMauro.com. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, all the other things that you do for JD. We got to join forces to win these races. I'm looking forward to doing it. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate it. Everyone watching, we got another one tomorrow at 6. We got to reschedule the one yesterday because again, Zoom was overwhelmed yesterday. I think they're fixing security issues and that overwhelmed them a little bit. But I appreciate everyone showing up. And with that, I just want to say thank you again, Eddie. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, JD, and thanks everybody for watching. Have a great day.